Picked up again by McDavid, straight up the middle, McDavid in, scores! What a goal! Tony Subban scores! Crosby scores! Sidney Crosby, the golden goal! He did it! The greatest goal scorer in National Hockey League history is Wayne Gretzky! And Hemsky's loose! Hemsky, he scores! Can you believe what we just saw? In comes Tavares, walks in, Reed scores! Tavares again! Canada's back in it! 3, 2, 1! Series over!
Hello and welcome to the first episode of the One Timers podcast. I'm your co-host Cameron Scott, along with my partner in crime, Julia Macri. Jules, how are we doing?
We're doing good, Cam. You know, hockey's back, so we're as happy as can be, and we're ready to roll.
Absolutely. Little quick thing about us, why we decided to start this podcast. Me and Jules very, very dedicated to the game of hockey, talking the phone a whole bunch about different trades, different moves, different plays. And throughout this year with COVID and quarantine, the podcasts have really started to grow, and we decided, dip our toe in the water and see what happens. So without further ado, let's start the first episode.
All right, so we're going to start out with the Leafs-Canadiens Game 1, the marquee matchup from Wednesday night. I wanted to know your thoughts on the game. I know you're a huge Montreal fan, so let's hear what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so overall going into the game, the matchup, I didn't like it as a Habs fan without any much practice, without much game experience. I thought the Leafs would be able to maybe run away with it just based on more skill alone. Overall, I was very happy with the way the Habs played top to bottom, right? Josh Anderson, new pickup, probably the best player on the team for them, if not on the ice overall. And I don't think that's biased in saying that. Looked very good. Nick Suzuki looked great. Romanov looked great. And to be able to get a point on the road to start the season is a great look. To look at it from the other side, I think the Leafs also had a very strong game, and they are the team that everyone thinks they are, and they could really be a force this year.
Yeah, I want to touch on Josh Anderson there. Oh my God, that guy was all world the other night. And I know it's first game. I know it's easy to look at the contract, and everybody's kind of worried about that. But that reminded me of Kevin Hayes with the Flyers for a second there, where, he had a lot of talk about how bad the contract was. And it's like, what is he going to do when he shows up? And, the contract might not look good years down the road again, but, if he can bring it for the first couple years of it, it's going to look good. And I thought he was the best player on the ice the other night. I thought William Nylander was the best player for Toronto. I thought those two guys really stood out to me in their game. Anderson, his drive wide in that goal, I'm not sure if he got credit for it or Suzuki got credit for it.
He did, yeah.
He got credit for it. I think he burnt Tavares wide there, dropped the shoulder. And, that's something that's missing a lot from, I find, Montreal's lineup. They have some guys who go to the net, obviously Gallagher, but they don't have that big force that can really drive the play like that. And yeah, he really stood out to me. I really liked Alexander Romanov's play. I know first game in the NHL, but he made some nice plays, some nice passes, some nice chips. He just looked smart. He looked more comfortable than many of the rookie D you'll ever see play their first game. So those two guys stood out for me. And when I was watching Toronto play, like I said, Nylander was fantastic, but all the top guys for Toronto I thought played pretty solid. I think, their question is, what is our depth going to do? And I think that none of the depth really blew me away, but they can win games just on their top guys. So,
yeah. And so for the listeners, this is our first recorded episode, but we did a practice episode about 5 days ago, maybe, and talked about all of our expectations into this. We might drop that at a future date. But so one of the things we talked about a lot was the moves that the Leafs made with Simmons and Thornton. And other than Simmons serving 5 minutes for fighting Sherratt, I don't see if they're worth half of a minimum contract. I don't, and it's no disrespect on Joe Thornton's name, because absolute Hall of Famer and bona fide star in the NHL, but not anymore. Right. And I think it's one game, and I'm not saying that he can't be a success, but they don't need him to be successful. And I think if anything, if they're trying to make him play on that top line and trying to make him be the guy he used to be, it's just going to hurt them.
Yeah, well, when we were chatting the other day, we were talking about how long it's going to take Thornton to be off that line, because I guess for him to go to Toronto, Dubas had promised him, you're going to play on the top line, or you're going to get a shot with Matthews and Marner. And who wouldn't want to play with those guys? They're two of the best in the NHL, and they're young. It's fantastic wing to play on if you want to get points. But we were both discussing, like, how long is Thornton going to be there? I think he got somewhere into the late first period before Hyman was back on that line. So I felt bad for him in a bit of a sense, but I know we could all assume he wasn't going to play a long time on that line. But you're right. There's really no reason for him to be there. If you have Spezza as the depth centerman and you have Kerfoot as your third line center, I don't see the need to sign a guy like Thornton. I love, how they bring in some older guys, some guys that can lead the younger guys, because I think they've had issues with their younger guys really buying in. So I like it from that perspective. But on ice, I think a guy like Jumbo Joe probably wants to play. He wants to win and cement a legacy. And I don't think Toronto is going to be able to stay competitive and try and make room for him on a top two line role. With Simmons, I don't think Simmons looked effective at all. They had him on the PP1 in front of the net, and I know that's where he made his living in Philadelphia for years and years. But last year you had Nylander and Tavares as net front guys on the power play, and I think Nylander was on a 40 goal pace, and Tavares has proven time and time again he can be there. So I understand the sentiment, but you're really not going to make your other guys happy doing that. And I think that it's something that it's really just doesn't strike me as the smartest move long term, but I think things are going to be shaken up there pretty quick, and the other guys will go in and fill those spots.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I don't think it'll last. I agree with that. Going to the power play, there was a point, I think back-to-back power plays, I remember watching it. Marner wasn't on the top unit, right? Marner wasn't playing with Matthews at the same, like, on that power play. I'm not saying that he's not on the top unit. Maybe there was a reason for that. I'm not sure. But if you're going to put, right, Jumbo and Simmons on a power play unit, like, we're past the time. Like, that's the one thing that I loved about the Habs taking Frolik and Perry and saying, like, Perry is an NHL player. I think he's in a very similar spot to Jumbo Joe is. And the Habs said, like, you might be a Hall of Famer, but you're not a player on our team now. You're going to go on waivers. You'd be in the practice squad. You might get in lineups. But he knows now that that's the position that he's in. And I just don't think Jumbo is there, or people still kind of see the high side of Jumbo, which I don't think is there anymore.
Yeah, I think that this season, especially with it being short, there's not a lot of room for experimentation. You have 56 games. You had a week-long training camp. So I can't see all this experimenting lasting a long time. You got to get your lineup set. You got to get rolling pretty quick. So from my perspective, I sit there and look at it and be like, okay, well, you got to figure out his role fast, because you can't keep moving guys around too far into the season. I think that having him up there could have cost them. I'm not saying could have cost them the game, but if you're not figuring out your lines and your roles for your guys, you could lose some points early in the season that could come back to bite you later in the season. But back with Montreal, I wanted to ask you, there's a huge hype around Pierre-Luc Dubois being traded, and the possibility of him going to Montreal has a lot of people happy. I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts on it? What would it take to make that deal?
Well, that's what's going to potentially put a smile on my face or start the fire Bergevin up again. And for what Bergevin has done up to now, I think he's went like this, right? Everyone wanted his head, and then people said, oh, this is actually maybe working, and then everyone wanted his head again. But I think overall, I like, when I take the sum of everything, I like what he's done. If he were to make this deal, it has to be good. So when I make something up and Columbus has already said it has to be Suzuki or KK, right? One of them is involved. If it's it's so early, and that's what I don't like. But the age isn't a massive difference, but it's 2 years difference, one year to Suzuki. So, and I think you're kind of getting more of a sure thing with Dubois. So I wouldn't be mad about trading KK. Like, it might come back to bite you in the butt in 10 years. And then involved in that, definitely a pick, which again, it's fine. And then I don't know if they want a defenseman. They have a strong decor. We have prospects. If it would be, I mean, Jordan Harris is a very high prospect at Northeastern, Struble, but I think Drouin would be involved. So that's, if I had to make a deal, it'd be KK, Drouin, maybe a prospect and a first. I would love to get rid of Drouin. $5.5 million, not a lot of production, but I don't know if he's a Tortorella kind of player. Was reading up something about that, how they said he's probably not a Tortorella kind of guy, but he's also best friends with Domi. So if Domi has any pull, that could work.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is that if they're calling and they're asking for Suzuki, you can't be on that phone call for more than 5 seconds. I think Suzuki was fantastic in the bubble, and the other night he was phenomenal again. I understand that Dubois is a first line center in the league, and he's fantastic. He's big, strong, powerful. He drives net, but I'm really excited to see what Suzuki can become, because I think he's made a lot of steps in the right direction in a very short period of time. So I'm really don't think you sell on him. I think you have to keep him. I think that any kind of trade, I don't know, even 2 years down the line, if Dubois is going to be better than Suzuki or much better than him. So I'm afraid to give that up for the now and then have Suzuki go, become a superstar, become a star at least. My thing about KK is that if Montreal's trying to win now, KK's not ready to win now, in my opinion. I watched him last. I thought he was fantastic in the bubble. I thought that was the best hockey I've ever seen him play. The other night, I thought he was okay. I didn't think he stood out very much to me. So I think if you can make that deal and you're giving up KK, yeah, like you said, he might develop into the center that you drafted him for, and it could burn you 10 years down the line. But I personally don't see him ever developing into anything better than what Dubois already is. I consider that pretty much his ceiling from my point of view of watching him. So if you're able to make this deal and you're giving up KK and getting Dubois back, then I'm all with it. The question is what is packaging with it? Because I don't think just KK is getting you Dubois. Like you said, you're probably going to have to throw in a prospect, maybe a Goulet or something like that, even though he's pretty highly touted. And I'm not sure the cap situation there, but you'll probably have to throw in a guy like Drouin just to make the money work, because KK's on an entry level and a prospect that's low money. You're bringing in a guy like Dubois who just signed his $5 million contract. So you're probably going to have to move 5 the other way. Drouin's on a 5.5. I could see that working. But like you said, I don't see Columbus wanting a Drouin. So it makes it a bit more difficult. But the other things that Columbus might want would be like a Toffoli. And I don't think the Habs are going to trade a guy they just signed to a 4-year deal. So for me, like, it's got to be KK and a prospect and maybe Drouin or somebody else in his price range. But Dubois is a fantastic player. And if they pick him up and that's all they get, and you have your top 3 is Danault, Dubois would be number 1, Suzuki, and then Danault is your third line center. That makes them extremely dangerous. So I'm excited to see if that could happen, but I'm not sure if it's going to go down yet.
Yeah, exactly. And rumors are rumors, and it helps that he's French, because we jump on that. Montreal gets pretty much every rumor you can from, it's like the Leafs and Ontario born players. It does fit in that case. And last thing I'm going to say on Dubois, I think he could be, he's obviously not as good as Matt Barzal, but in a very similar situation in my mind to Barzal in New York, where they do not play an offensive style of hockey, right? They play a very defensive style and not a point production style. So if you have Dubois leave and come to somewhere that's a little more free flowing, if we were to get him, like I think he could really, really surprise people. And I don't like that saying because say surprise people, you're basically just not putting any skin in the game. But I'd say if he moves to anywhere offensively, he could be well over a point per game player.
All right. So that's going to move us to our next topic. I'm very curious to know your opinion on this. Seen a couple things about it around on TSN and such that I know they didn't have a bunch of points the other night, but Matthews and Marner, do you think that in this 56 game season that Matthews and Marner could have the same point totals combined as McDavid and Draisaitl?
So very, very interesting and very good arguments either way, I think. If the Edmonton Oilers are going to make the playoffs, then not a chance. No chance in the world, right? I think the sum of the two could be 20 to 30 point difference, because if the Oilers are going to make the playoffs, those two are going to have fighting for the heart years. I don't think the Oilers are good enough without them being the star. That being said, if they have a little bit of a step back years, obviously Draisaitl has to step back. Then yeah, I think Matthews and Marner will both be probably in the mid 70s. I don't know if they're going to touch 80, but definitely in the 70s by the end of the year. It just comes down to how high the other two get, because you're playing the same team over and over again. They're going to find the back of the net.
Yeah. So for me, I don't think it happens unless McDavid gets hurt. McDavid has to miss 10 games for me for it to happen. I can't see it being too close. I will say that Matthews at Marner, and if they go with Hyman, they're dangerous in the power play. I know that Edmonton's power play was ridiculous last season. And if that takes a step back, then that can make it a lot closer. But for me, I just think McDavid and Draisaitl are just too special of players. And it does change a lot that McDavid and Draisaitl are on different lines. So if one might be rolling, the other one might not be. But Marner and Matthews are together. So everything they're doing, their points are going to be coming together, power plays together. So if they succeed, they're gonna spread up a lot together. But I think, like you said, that Edmonton has no chance the playoffs without those two guys rolling. And if those guys don't put up 80 points or close to 80 points or mid 70s, then Edmonton's not in the playoff picture, because their D and especially their goaltending is just not at the level of the other teams in that division.
Absolutely. And just the reason I also say that it won't happen is when you talk about playing a series and you got to play back-to-backs against the same team. Take, for example, what just happened. Edmonton and Vancouver play back-to-back, right? Draisaitl has 1 assist. McDavid has none in the opener. They come back, play each other the next night. One has 4, or they both have 4 points. One has a hat trick and 1. The other one has 4 assists. So I think if you have a bad night, but you got to come back and play the same guys, you're not shutting down McDavid and Draisaitl 2 nights in a row. I think at this point in time, you can shut down Matthews and Marner.
Yeah. So next one is Kirill Kaprizov, 21 minutes and 52 seconds of ice time in his NHL debut, a goal and an assist.
Calder.
We hearing a Calder?
He's right there, and he was before. Obviously, when we had this conversation last time, I think we'll get to the awards later on, a little bit of some predictions, but he's not a rookie. He's not he's a rookie, but he's not a 18, 19-year-old rookie. 97 born. Is he 20? Is he 24 right now?
He's either 23 or 24.
Right. So, and he has, was it 4 KHL seasons behind him, where last year he was high, like not always successful in them, but the last 2 he's been a lot stronger, or 3 KHL seasons. So he's coming in full-fledged, and unlike the examples we talk about Gusev last year, who I don't think he had a bad season, but he was supposed to come in and lead them to the playoffs. Didn't happen. Shipashov from the Vegas Knights a couple years ago. That pronunciation there. But he came in, no points in 3 games. What didn't like the lines went home. I think it is huge for Kaprizov to have 3 points and play 22 minutes almost in his first game, because now his like expectations and everything were so high on him. Now he has 3 points in the OT winner. He can be comfortable. He can just run that team. I still don't know if they make the playoffs, but he now has a weight off his back. He doesn't have to try to play catch up points wise.
Yeah, I completely agree. He needed the confidence and say, everybody goes, well, how is he going to adjust to the NHL game? Well, he adjusted, he feels good, and he'll be ready for the next one. My big thing with Kaprizov is that you see other rookies come in. So like you have Lafreniere playing in New York, and he's on the 3rd line right now because ahead of him they have Kreider and Panarin. So he's coming into a lesser role. Kaprizov's walking in, and he is the guy, 21 minutes and 52 seconds. So almost 22 minutes of ice time for a forward in his debut. That's a sign that they're going to run with this guy all the way they can. Like, I'm trying to think of another absolutely elite forward on Minnesota's roster, and I can't really think of anybody I would put in the category of truly elite. So if he can step up and be that, he will be the guy, and he'll get as many opportunities as he can breathe and stay on the ice for. So when you say the words Calder, if he's playing 22 minutes a night, he's going to get some points with his skill level, and it's not too far out of his reach. I think that's, amazing feat in his first game. And I think he looked fantastic. I will say the goal in OT was pretty lucky. He loses the puck and it hits the skate. I mean, he can argue that maybe he meant to do it, but I think we all know he didn't. So it was pretty great, and probably a special moment for him and his teammates, though.
Yeah, well, you can see the emotion on their coach's face when they scored. He was like, because I just feel like it's always a risk when you take a shot at the Russian like that. And like I said, we're not jumping to conclusions. We're not giving him any awards right now, but it is just, there's so much less pressure now moving forwards. And when I say Calder for him, personally, I like, obviously you can't not like Lafreniere, but I think that division is going to be way too hard for him to win it. I think Stützle could definitely do it, but he's in the case of Panarin with the Calder. He's 3-4 years older than the rest of the guys. He's already played pro. He comes in ready. There's no 10-12 game like intermittent period. So that's why I say that he's probably the pick right now. But he looked great. He looked fantastic.
Yeah, if he can keep that up, there's no doubt in my mind he'll be right in the conversation, if not nominated. You have to see how the big players like Laffy and Shesterkin will play. But right now, like you said, like he's a guy who can be a front runner and can potentially win that award. But to segue into our next one, the Detroit Red Wings had 14 shots on goal in their first game of the season. Are they the worst team in the NHL? And how long are they going to be in that spot?
So their prospect pool, if we're going to jump, because that first question is yes, they are the worst by far, hands down, no question. They are a glorified taxi squad with a couple players, I believe, at the moment. But their prospect pool is very, very high. You have Raymond, you have Sider, Jared McIsaac, Halifax guy. And watching the World Juniors, 6th round pick, and Elmer Soderblom, who it looks like he's going to come in and score 50. Obviously, it's a tournament, but their prospect pool overall is very, very deep. You have Veleno that's still not in the league yet, so they're fine on that. How long it's going to take for those guys to be impactful? A few years, and if they all turn out, because that's the risk you always play with the prospect game, is if you hit 50%, you're doing pretty well. So this year, I think it's a write-off. Next year, we'll see what happens if they make moves. Who knows? We thought Ottawa was going to be a wreck this year. They made a lot of moves, and now they don't look so bad. but no, they're a disgrace of a hockey team at the moment. They're going to get lucky. They're going to win a couple games, obviously, because no one's going to lose 56. But I'd be interested to see how many games they deserve to win this year.
Over under on 10 games.
Oh, that's tough. I'm going to put the over just because I think, like I said, you're playing so many back-to-backs. They're just going to find ways to. Oh, that's close. Yeah, no, I'm going to put them right at 10.
Yeah, I think they're in the weakest division overall in the NHL currently. So I think they do squeak at least 10 because I don't think Chicago's got much this year. I understand you still have Patrick Kane, but losing Taves and Kirby Dach and not really having a viable goaltending option makes them in the basement as well. So I do think Detroit finds a way to get over 10 games. I will say with you that they are definitely the worst team in the NHL, in my opinion. And they will move forward. I do like the prospect pool. I'm a little nervous with them that they haven't really drafted anybody at center that I think is going to be a great NHL center. I do like Foligno. I hope that he can come in, but I see his ceiling around a second line center. So they have a lot of young D and they have a lot of young wingers in the prospect pool, but I don't really see that elite center option. So I'm hoping that they find a way to draft that in the next year or two, maybe Matt Beniers this year, if depending on where they land in the draft lottery. But moving forward from that, if we're talking about young guys, so no Quinton Byfield, Arthur Kaliev, Trevor Zegras, or Jamie Drysdale in that Western division. What are your thoughts?
So you obviously knew that all four weren't going to make it, but I thought one or two would. Kaliev, I don't know if Kaliev moves quite at the level, but with the Kings and the Ducks, neither team are strong, right? Neither team are like deep offensively in any way, and the Ducks aren't deep on the back end either. So you have lots of room where guys could have entered. The biggest question marks, I guess, for me were Zegras and Byfield, just because maybe Zegras isn't ready. He sits at like 6'170" right now, I think. Maybe he just wasn't physically ready and they wanted him to take a little bit more time. Who knows? But Byfield, people are going to continue to say it. We've been saying it for a while. I'm not pulling the bust card by any means, but there's something missing. There has been for a while.
Yeah, I got the chance to watch Byfield last year in Sudbury in the OHL, and I was at the game and I was watching him, and I thought he looked good, but I thought he would drive wide and he would burn some guys, his big body, and he was physical. And at the end of the game, I was looking at the score sheet and he was first star. I think he had 5 or 6 points. I was like, where was he all night? So my big thing with him is that I watched in the World Juniors. I thought he was no good in the World Juniors. I'm not gonna be even too polite on that. I thought he was not very strong at all. I know he had the 1 6-point night, and that got him all his points. But other than that, I thought he was pretty invisible, which is hard to see I know like you have a lot of returning players there, but being a second overall pick, you expect him to come in and make an impact. So him being sent to the A was not surprising at all for me. I don't think he's ready for the NHL in any capacity currently. That's not saying in the future he's not going to turn out, but there, like you said, there's something missing there. He chases the puck hard. He skates well. He's a big body. He looks really good in a lot of things that he does, but then sometimes he's not doing a whole lot out there. He's skating hard and he's looking good, but he's not creating. So him being sent down, I suspected. Kaliev, like you said, he can't move. He's big and he's slow. He can shoot the puck like it's nobody's business. You get him in the offensive zone, you get the puck on his stick for a second and a half. He's deadly, but he just can't move. He was slow in the World Juniors. Never mind, you put him on an NHL ice surface, so he needs to be in the A and have some growing time. Drysdale, I thought he was decently impressive in the World Juniors. I didn't think he was that standout. But being on the top pairing with Bo and Byram, I thought they looked good together. So I understand him going to the A because I don't think he's quite ready to be an impact, especially as a D. I wouldn't want him to get beat around in the NHL or have his confidence knocked down just not being ready. Zegras, I was very surprised with him getting sent down, just on the sole base that I don't really think Anaheim has that much to work with, especially up the middle. I think Adam Henrique is currently their first line center. So I figured it would be one of those situations where you could bring him in, and they do have some bigger guys on the side, like Getzlaf, to put with him and protect him a bit and kind of mentor him into the NHL. I thought that was what was going to happen this year. But I understand not wanting to ruin a prospect as promising as him and as skilled of a player. So I understand him getting sent down, but that one did surprise me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to segue, I'm just, as soon as you said talking about Kaliev's shot, it just entered my mind. Watching the game last night, the Islanders-Rangers game, can we talk about our boy Barzal on that shot?
Oh my Lord. He is amazing to watch. I remember watching him in the bubble, and I was like, wow, like I'm surprised even with that defensive of a system that they play under, that he's not a point per game NHLer. I was like, what? This guy is amazing. He's one of those people where every time he's on the ice, he's a threat. He just creates plays, and that move and that shot, I can't get over it. I watched, I think, 4 or 5 times today. It's just blowing me away. He's a special player. The fact that they argued him down to a lower cap hit on his signing just infuriates me, because I think he is a premier center in the NHL.
Yeah, I had this conversation with my dad actually when he made the signing, and I said, what a steal by Lou at 3 years at $7 million, right? As that bridge deal, which we see a lot of people doing, and there is not a lot of money right now circulating. So it kind of makes sense. But at the same time, when you look at the way, like how much other guys get paid, like the cap that Marner's at, Matthews, obviously McDavid, this guy is not $6 million less than McDavid. He's not $3.5 million less than Matthews and Marner. He might be that much less because he's in the Islanders and people haven't seen it yet. So there's no evidence backing this, really. But I think if he gets moved to a team where he gets to run and gun, like I said with Dubois, like I think he could have a heart in this league.
That is a bold statement right there, but
I think he
don't disagree.
Yeah, I think he is the top tier player in this league.
I can't disagree with you. Like, he is phenomenal, and he's one of those players that whenever he has the puck on his stick, he becomes dangerous. It becomes a scoring chance. His ability to cut back in the offensive zone and find lanes, he's special. I think if he was on another team, like you said, if he was on a team, I don't know, like Montreal, and he was their first line center with a guy, like, I understand that I'm not putting any disrespect on Anders Lee and Jordan Eberle. I think those guys are all fantastic that Barzal plays with. And I think that, he gets good points. I mean the controlled style that Barry Trotz has as a coach. If he played in a more freewheeling team, even something that's not super offensive like Montreal, I still think he's over a point per game player.
Yeah, and I think by the end of his career, he will be a 100-point guy. If he stays in the Islanders, I think that's going to be a whole lot tougher. If he goes somewhere, he might be the most obvious guy for me watching what he could be, I think, somewhere else. And I talk about the Habs. I don't know why they didn't offer sheet him. Just at some number and don't waste it like they did with Aho last year. Like, actually just give a real offer, see what would have happened, because you know that they were going to match anyway. But at least you would have been able to screw them with the cap a little bit. So I was kind of disappointed about that, but it's the way she goes.
Well, I wanted to segue into another thing, was that we talked about the Red Wings being the worst team in the league. I personally think that Tampa Bay is still the best team in the NHL. I think they're in the worst division in the league. And I think the Tampa Bay Lightning could win 45 games of this regular season. Do you think that they can reach that mark? Yes or no?
I'm going to say no. Are they the best team in the league? Yes, hands down. Is it going to come down to a 4-team race in my mind, I think, for the Cup this year? In them, Philly, Vegas, and Colorado, which it's really not because Vegas and Colorado have to go through each other. Yes, and I think that when Kucherov comes back, they're just going to walk over the whole league and they're going to go back to back. Yes. When you get to play the same team over and over again, I think it's easy to lose a couple. So you got to go to Carolina and play them back to back twice in a year. I don't know if you win both of those. You're not going to lose to Detroit. You're not going to lose to Colorado to Chicago. But I think the same thing goes with Columbus. You're not going to sweep Dallas. So 44 is you said 45, 42 maybe.
Okay, I like that.
I like them above 40.
Yeah, I agree with you in that sense. I think for me, I look at the games and I say, okay, who they're going to lose to, because I understand that parity is a big thing in the NHL and anybody can beat anybody. But if you're Tampa Bay and you lose to Detroit, you should pretty much be ashamed of yourself. And those guys will get skated for probably a full week. The teams that do scare me for beating them is that I think Columbus can steal 4 out of the 8. I think Columbus does have their number to a certain extent. I understand Tampa slayed that demon last year in the playoffs, but I think Columbus still took them to 6, I believe, plus that very far OT game. So I think Columbus can steal a few. I think Carolina is pretty dangerous, can steal a few. Like you said, Dallas, they went to 6 in the playoffs, Stanley Cup final. So I think they can take a few as well. But I think Dallas is facing a lot of injuries right now. And obviously they're coming off this big COVID scare and a lot of players testing positive. So I think they're going to be a bit slower out of the gate than the rest of the teams in the division. So for me, I don't think it's a stretch to say that they can win 45 games. And to go into our next point, we're going to talk about some award winners. I think if they're winning 45 games, I think Andrei Vasilevsky is going to start at minimum around 40 games. So I think if they're winning as much as I think they will with him in net and in that week of division, I think he is my choice for the Vezina.
Absolutely. And I gotta touch on Tampa one more quick time. You said, who are they going to lose to? And I agree. I think Carolina is fantastic and will beat Tampa a couple times. Like you said with Columbus, maybe Nashville gets lucky a couple times. Lucky's the word. They will lose games the same way that Detroit will win games, right? We said we think they're going to get above 10, or I put them at about 10 wins. That's where you put Tampa at about 10 regulation losses, a couple in overtime. So it just happens in the league, right? We're not going back to the lockout Blackhawks that they have a 24 game point streak in that season. I just don't see it happening.
All right. I completely agree with that. It's tough, but like you said, they're going to lose games the way Detroit's going to win them. But for me, I see Detroit beating the other teams. I don't see Detroit beating Tampa Bay. Like Detroit will be able to sneak games from Florida and they're going to beat Chicago and they're going to sneak games from Nashville. But when I look at those other, those top 3 teams in that division, which are Tampa Bay, I would say Carolina and Columbus. I do think Dallas is a great team, but I would say the other 3 a bit above. I know they just went to the Cup final in that run, but missing Bishop and having some injuries, I think they're taking a step back. But I just can't see Tampa Bay losing too many games to those bottom 4 teams. And I think if they're going to have many losses, it's going to be against those, Carolina, Columbus, and Dallas.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. And I think we should move on from this. But even if they swept the bottom 4 teams and they lose 4 to Columbus, they split with Columbus, they split with Carolina, and they lose 2 to Dallas, there's 10 losses. And sure. And that's why I'm just saying it seems a little bit like a lot. But, I mean, who knows? With the transition over to future awards, I said this on our little practice take a week ago. Carter Hart or Vasilevsky's the obvious choice at the Vezina, but Carter Hart is right there because I think in that division, when we talk about it being so difficult, and I think it's going to be, other than the Jersey games, in the Buffalo games. It should be relatively low scoring and very tight games that I think the Flyers are going to win a lot of. Right? The only team that really worries me is the Islanders, and those games aren't going to be high scoring. So I see him having really, really good numbers. And what we said before, if he has very similar numbers to Vasilevsky in that division, he gets it because of the difficulty in my mind. Vasilevsky's a safe pick, but I'm just going to throw in the sleeper pick on Carter Hart.
I like it. Well, I'm a Flyers fan, so when I ever hear Carter Hart and the Vezina, I get a little excited. But for me, I looked at him the other night. They played the opener. I thought he played well. Obviously, Crosby had that bat out of the air and then tucks in
Nice
the open
assist.
net. Yeah, it was a great assist by Carter Hart out front to him. But I think Hart's a special goalie. I think he will win multiple Vezinas in his career. I just don't know if this is the season yet. I think the Flyers are competitive enough to give him the opportunity to win it. But oftentimes it's hard to see in that division what's going to happen. I think the Flyers should make the playoffs. I think they should win that division. But if they start to slip for any reason, Carter Hart's going to take a lot of blame. And I think that, like we said, like, okay, well, who's going to win it? And Vasilevsky's the front runner and he's the obvious pick. So I say, like, I like Carter Hart for it. I hope he gets nominated at least. I would love to see him win it. But if I'm looking at, like, okay, for him to win it, who does he have to beat? And I look over at Vasilevsky and I'm like, I can't see Vasilevsky slip into the top 2 in voting.
Yeah, no, and that's why I said he's the safe pick. I just thought I'd throw one in there. So let's transition. We talked about it a little bit earlier. The Calder. Because I'm gonna call you out on this. You did make a pick, and it's a very sleeper pick, but your goaltender pick for the Calder that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I had Igor Shesterkin for the Calder this year. I thought that the Rangers were going to take a step. He did not look good in that opening game. None of the Rangers did, in my opinion. I didn't think Lafreniere played well. I really thought Panarin was half asleep on the ice. I thought the whole team, but that's what the Islanders do to you. We all know that. Obviously, Kaprizov did impress, so I can't change my pick, though. I'm really hoping that Shesterkin plays the way that he played last season. I think he's a real sleeper pick for it. I think he can win it. I think that in order for the Rangers to make the playoffs, he's going to have to win it. I think he's right there in that conversation, so I'm going to stick with him.
Yeah, I respect that. I had to laugh at giving up the 3 first period goals and 2 in the first 5 minutes. It made me smile. I really love Kaprizov, but my pick, obviously a little biased coming out of the World Junior Tournament, is Tim Stützle. We'll get to watch him tonight in about an hour and a half. I'm gonna have to go with him. I think, obviously, if Kaprizov, like you said, if he wins it, it'd be like it's kind of similar to Vasilevsky right now. He has all the tools to win it. I think someone else could surprise and do something. And Stützle, unlike Laffy, is on the first line or on the second line right now, but he's on the second line with Dadonov and Stepan. So he's playing with 2 older guys, and both guys who could bring the offensive, especially Dadonov, already bring that offensive flame. So he's in a position that could surprise, but if Minnesota is going to have any success, Kaprizov's going to be well over a point per game in my mind, because they don't win games if that first line doesn't score.
Yeah, the thing that intrigues me about Stützle is that, like you said, he's in that first or second line, however you want to call it, but their best 2 forwards are both left wings. It's Brady Tkachuk and going to be Tim Stützle. And they're the cornerstone pieces of that offense for years to come. And they're both left wing, left-handed shots. So I'm curious to see if Stützle transitions to center at some point in his career, but he is a good sleeper pick for it. I know a 3rd overall pick coming right in. I think he looked obviously fantastic at the World Juniors. He's a special player. And I think that division has some of the more offensive teams. So I think he has a potential to put up a lot more points in the North Division. I just don't see Ottawa being competitive enough to give him the opportunity to win, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think just points wise, that's why I don't think Minnesota's given the Kaprizov any of the chance to win because I don't think they're a playoff team. So, and Ottawa probably will end up coming last in that division. But I just see him, if he puts up, I mean, if he's mid 40s, he's like in that almost 50 range, he will be probably second in rookie scoring, which depending on how much Kaprizov runs away, then it's my sleeper pick.
So here's my thing on it, is that I think that West division that Minnesota's in is fairly weak. So Minnesota might slip into that fourth playoff spot, but even if they finish just out of a playoff spot, like they finish the 5th team in the division, and Kaprizov has, 40, let's say 40 points. He needs to have in the 50s for them to be competitive. But let's say he's in the mid 40 range and they are the 5th team in the division. And then Stützle has an unbelievable year. He puts up 45 points and they finish last in the division. I think it'll go to Kaprizov just because his team was able to be more competitive because of what he brought.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a possibility. We weren't going to go into division predictions. We were going to leave that for a little bit of a future, but I'm going to throw in a thought on mine. You say Minnesota make the playoffs. I say no chance. I think San Jose makes that 4th seed in that division, in my mind.
Yeah, well, I thought they played well the other night, and I thought Evander Kane actually had a great game, even with everything that's going on with him. Yeah, they're a team that they're older and they're healthy. If Martin Jones bounces back, there's no reason they shouldn't make the playoffs. Obviously, we saw the dumpster fire that was the last season for them, but I think that last spot is going to be actually pretty competitive between them, Minnesota, and LA. Actually, I think they're all going to be in a little group together battling for it. But yeah, if Minnesota is going to be in that spot, it's all because of Kaprizov. My question for you is, who is going to win the Norris Trophy?
So we talked about this in the past, and this is a long, hard to debate. And I don't want to talk about it too long. I just want to give my answer, and it's hard. Like it burns me, but I'm gonna just straight up say back-to-back for Roman Josi.
See, the thing is, I can't argue with it. I have a different choice, maybe because I'm a fan of the guy, but I look at the Norris race for myself and I say, okay, Roman Josi, if he leads that team in points again, and he leads it by, obviously 56 game season. So if he leads them by 15 points over the 56 game season, he's a lock. Like I'd like them to be competitive. They have to be in the conversation in that division or make the playoffs, and he'll win it. You look at Hedman, they're going to run away with that division. He should, by all means, he should win it or be in the conversation. I like Cale Makar. I didn't think he had a great game the other night in the opener, but I like Cale Makar for the Norris. I think that he makes he's the best on their blue line, and they have a deep blue line. I think if he's on that first power play unit, as he is with McKinnon and Landeskog and Rantanen, I think that he's going to put up a lot of points, and I think he's my guy.
And yeah, I knew you were going to say that because we talked about this in the past, and you love him. When you can't not love him, he's fantastic. And yeah, I'm looking here. He still played 24 minutes in that game, right? Opening game. That's impressive. And he is definitely their number one and one of the top number ones in the league. I still think he's not that he's a step behind, but just in like leading a team, a step behind your Carlson. That's John Carlson, Josi, and Hedman. So in that, the young guys, I like him. Obviously, it's Heiskanen, him, and Hughes. For those who don't know, Heiskanen is one of my favorite players. I would love to say that he's going to win the Norris, but as we talked about issues in Dallas, he's a couple years away, I believe. And this year, I don't see them being overly successful because of COVID issues, injuries, whatever it will be. So yeah, Yossi's my pick. I'll ask you a question on who's your heart.
That is a tough consideration because I think the Hart's one of the weirder trophies in the NHL because generally it's okay if you win the Art Ross, you win the Hart Trophy. And the only exception is if you drag a team to the playoffs that has no earthly business being there, then you can win the Hart. That's basically your two considerations to be the Hart Trophy. So on one hand, I look at Connor McDavid and I say he might have the ability to do both. He might have the ability to not only win the Art Ross and be in that conversation, but also him and Draisaitl have to drag a team that they don't have the goaltending to really be. I know they finished 5th in the West last year, but they did lose to Chicago in the play-ins. If they're going to make the playoffs, like we said earlier in this show, that he has to be dynamite and he has to drag them there. So I think he's the no-brainer option, but I do obviously looking at McKinnon. I really like him. I really like his choice. I also have a sleeper pick. I don't think the Pittsburgh Penguins are very strong this year. I watched them the other night. I think they're fairly weak. And I think in order for them to make the playoffs, I think that Sidney Crosby is going to have a Hart Trophy season. So my choice is McDavid, but if I have to go with a little sleeper option, I know it's a bit of a cop-out to have two. I would like to see Crosby.
Yeah, and you're allowed. I think every question you've asked, I've said about 3 names so far. I haven't been the most exact guy, but in this case, I would go as far to say that if he doesn't win the Hart, they don't make the playoffs. Like in Pittsburgh, they're in the same position. They were the 5 seed last year. They really didn't lose. They lost Murray, but they didn't overly get worse. But they're in the same boat as Edmonton. Like their division got better, and I just don't think they're able to compete and make the playoffs in that division. So I don't mind the Crosby pick. My Hart, I'm gonna go with McDavid in that case. McKinnon for me would be very, very easy to pick, and it probably is very easy to pick, and I probably should pick him. Especially because we don't have Edmonton making the playoffs the last time we talked. But I just think you can only bet against the top guy so many times, right? Like you can only make and not that McKinnon's that far down from McDavid, but he is the best player in the world right now for a reason, and I just think he's going to get it this year.
So is he your Art Ross Trophy winner pick as well, or?
That one's tough because it's him and Draisaitl. I do think he's going to end up passing him. I'd say passing him. They played 2 games. He's a point behind him. I don't mean that way. I just think he's going to end up taking the lead in that. They're going to be close though. But I think as last year it was Draisaitl's year, I think it's going to be McDavid's year this year.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think you look at some of the teams and some of the divisions, like I can't see an Art Ross Trophy winner coming out of that East Division. Like I know there's some great players there, but there's just too many good defensive teams that you have to play 8 times. And I really look at the North Division. I only see Calgary has a good goaltender in Markstrom and some pretty solid D. And I see Montreal as having Price as a great goaltender and some really solid D. Those are the only 2 really defensive-minded teams I see in that division. So I feel like the winner is going to come out of the North Division for the Art Ross, and it is the no-brainer. It's the easy choice, but picking anybody other than McDavid or Draisaitl is a tough conversation for me. So you got to have to go to McDavid.
Yeah, well, and like I said, it's hard to go against. I always end up going against the big dog, and I try to make these sleeper picks that never pan out. But in this case, he didn't win it last year. Everyone's talking about Draisaitl. That was the Draisaitl's year. Not that he's listening to any of those critics, but he's not letting Draisaitl have 2 years in a row. I think he's gonna. Not that it's a competition between the two. It's a healthy competition, but he's gonna take charge. It's just my thought. Stanley Cup champ.
Tampa Bay Lightning. They have LTIR, and they're going to pull Patrick Kane coming back for Chicago in the 2015 playoffs. They added a few pieces at the deadline, and they didn't have to worry about the cap with Kane because he came back for playoffs. They now have the same thing with Kucherov and Tampa Bay. They were able to keep their team together. Phil Stamkos in on that line. They'll run away with the division. Kucherov will come back for playoffs, and they're going to repeat.
Yeah, I have no complaints here. No, I'm not going to argue that. To make it more interesting, I guess, who are they going to beat in the finals? Who's the West team?
It's going to be the Colorado Avalanche. I know there's the questions about their goaltending. I know that most people I've seen, I think they have the highest odds to win the cup is Colorado. Yeah. I do see a lot of competition in that division because I think St. Louis is still very competitive. I don't know why people have written off St. Louis. I think they're a great hockey club. Vegas is obviously good. I don't like Vegas's center depth, so they lose out for me. But Colorado, they would have been in that cup final and they would have been battling Tampa last year if they didn't lose both of their goaltenders. I mean, they won 2 games with Michael Hutchinson in net, and they went to, was it overtime or game 7 and lost? So I think that they go the distance with 2 healthy goalies if everybody's there. I think that they play Tampa in the final, and I could see them as the only team that could challenge, but I still can't see Tampa losing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. The St. Louis is an interesting one. We sat in your room right there on that chalkboard and wrote down the standings for you erased it now, but we had that there, the standings of each division. And we had St. Louis at 3, I believe, and that was not even close to the 1 and 2, which I don't know why we wrote them off. But they showed in that opening night, obviously it's just one game, that they played like they beat Colorado 4-1. They played them very, very strong. And honestly, I think outplayed them for a good chunk of the game. Anyway, obviously I don't think it was a 4-1 game necessarily, but I didn't catch the whole thing. But
yeah, the big thing for me with St. Louis is Binnington, because he comes on this miracle run, guys from the ECHL, and he wins a Stanley Cup, brings them all the way. Probably could have won the Conn Smythe, but Ryan O'Reilly got it. And then last year, he takes a huge step back. I know he was in the All-Star game and he played good at the start of the season, but he started to slip. And then in the bubble, he was god awful. So if he comes back this year and he plays the caliber that he did in that miracle run or at the start of last season for the entire length of the 56 games, they're a team you got to watch out for. Like, I understand losing Pietrangelo, he's a big piece, but you add Torrey Krug, he's a great power play quarterback. You still have Colton Parayko on that D. You have Justin Falk. I think they're a very strong team, especially their D and their depth on forward. They have Braden Chen, who is a first line center on a lot of teams in the NHL. They have playing left wing on the first line because they have so much center depth with Robert Thomas playing. So they're a team that is really scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Let's just hit one more award. I think we're running close on an hour now, maybe just over an hour. So let's to Jack Adams.
See, the Jack Adams is exactly the same thing as I talked about with the Hart earlier. It's either to the coach that is the team is just running away with the league, or it's the team that has no earthly business being in the playoffs and makes the playoffs. I could see it going to John Cooper if Tampa does what I think they're going to do. But I also think that at this point, everybody realizes how good of a roster they are. So I can't see him winning it. I think it goes to one of those teams that slides in. If I could see if Winnipeg does really well in the North Division, I could see them getting it. I could see, for me, I think it's going to be that team in the West, whoever sneaks into that 4th spot. If you see Minnesota sneak in there, them as well, or it's always a safe pick with Barry Trotz in New York. But I would like to say Paul Maurice in Winnipeg, because I think that Winnipeg is going to surprise a lot of people. I think most people had them as second last in that division. I think that if they make the playoffs, and I think that they can finish upwards of second in that division, if they're there, then I think he wins it.
Yeah, I like that pick 100%. The only issue with it I don't love is if he wins it, that means they make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs, I think it's Montreal might not make the playoffs. I don't know who trades off with who. That's why the competitive in that, like, there's so much competition in that division. I would say a super sleeper on that, who I really don't think is going to happen. I'd be more surprised and more pleased is in a similar boat if the Habs were to come. If they were to win that division or come second even, you could maybe see Claude Julien getting it. I don't see that happening. I just think that they're in the same boat. I don't know how. Yeah, I think Barry Trotz, because obviously Philadelphia as well. Really, definitely could. But Trotz, I think I put them at 2 in that division probably. So, and in a tough division like that, and they're built for that division, being able to play close games and shut down those high flying offenses. So yeah, I like that pick.
Yeah, well, I think that concludes the first episode of the One Timers Hockey Podcast. We want to thank everybody for listening and for tuning in. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we hope everybody's staying safe in the COVID era, and can't wait to catch you guys next time.
Absolutely. If you have any questions or thoughts that you'd like for us to talk about in the future, reach out on Facebook or Instagram, or on Instagram. Don't have a Facebook. We're going to post this up onto YouTube. Hopefully in the near future, we're going to get onto the Apple and Spotify podcast apps. Enjoy. Thanks.